Sorry, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and good evening, depending on which time zone you are in. Welcome to this webinar, Remembering, Rebuilding, Reimagining, and Life After Deafness. Before we start, we would like to let everyone know that this webinar will be recorded. And a couple of housekeeping rules for this webinar. First, you may activate the caption function by clicking on the closed caption button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And for those who need Spanish captions, the Spanish caption is displayed on the screen directly. And please remain muted and leave the video turned off throughout the webinar. And if you have questions to ask the speaker, to direct them to the chat box. And I, as the moderator, will pick up the questions in the question and answer time. Can I check if the caption is working right now?
It is.
Okay, caption is working. Okay. This is the schedule of this webinar. We are doing the introduction right now. And right after this, we will jump into the speaker sharing and followed by the question and answer time, and then conclusion. We would like to take this opportunity to introduce the people who run this webinar. We are the accessibility team within IFHOHYP, International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People. First, I am Peng. On the top left, I am from Malaysia. I use cochlear implant. And Bowen is the president of the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People. Bowen is from Canada. He uses both cochlear implant and hearing aid. Irina, she is from Russia. She uses hearing aid. Ralph, he is from the Philippines and uses hearing aids. Say, he is from Bolivia and uses hearing aid. Rui Xuan, she is from Singapore. She uses both cochlear implant and hearing aid. Seps, he is from the Philippines and uses hearing aids. And Milan, he is from Hungary and uses Baha, bone-anchored hearing aid. Now I will pass the floor to Bowen to introduce the organization and World Report on Hearing. Bowen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure to be here today to have the opportunity to present this webinar to all of you. I would just like to take a moment to introduce our organization, the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People. Next slide. So we are an international non-governmental federation for national and regional youth organizations that are dedicated to hard of hearing young people from the ages 18 to 35. Our mission is to enhance the quality of life for hard of hearing young people worldwide by empowering them to be advocates and to build visibility and representation of youth with disabilities at the European and international levels. So right now, we currently have 21 member countries, mostly in Europe and North America. Right now, we've been able to reach out to individuals in Asia, Africa, Oceania, and South America. So we're continuing to expand our presence around the world so that young hard of hearing young people can connect with one another. Next slide. So two major activities that we offer are the study sessions. The study session is an opportunity where all the young people gather together at a European Youth Center where they spend a whole week learning about the different skills to be leaders, to understand the human rights of advocating for access and inclusion, as well as capacity building to be able to run an organizations in their communities and to be able to lobby with the local policymakers for policies that affect us. For example, hearing aid, affordability, employment inclusion, access to education, so on and so forth. Next slide. On a more informal setting, we offer summer camps every other year. Normally, we will meet in person, but for this year, we'll be hosting a virtual summer camp where all the hard of hearing young people have the opportunities to just socialize in a very casual, informal setting and be able to share stories and their experiences in their lives, and of course, to have a lot of fun. Next slide. So here are our committees, which are the driving force of IFHOHYP. So this webinar would not have been possible without the support of the Accessibility Committee, which Pank has introduced to all of us. So I would personally like to acknowledge all the efforts and hard work the team has made to put together this webinar. And the other committees focus on other areas. So we encourage you to check out our website to find out what other committees are doing. Next slide. Right now, we currently have 4 main pillars in our strategic plan. The first one is digital presence, where we want to continue to offer webinars as well as social media forums for people to communicate during this uncertain times where we can all only connect virtually, which presented a whole new opportunity for us. Capacity building involving supporting our members to acquire the skills that they need to be advocates and to be able to fight for their access and inclusion needs. We develop policies to support them in this effort. And lastly, we want to maintain a financial stability so we can continue to do these programs. Next slide. So here is our information that you can connect with us by email, the website, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And now I would like to go into the World Report on Hearing. So this webinar is created in relation to the World Hearing Day, which happened on March the 3rd. I hope that some of you have been able to participate in activities on that day. So today we're continuing this conversation about the first launch of the World Report on Hearing, which is very significant for us because it highlights the importance and the vital need for us to be able to advocate for hearing care for all. Next slide, please. So today, 1 in 5 people worldwide live with hearing loss. And by 2050, 1 in 4 people are projected to have problems with their hearing. Next slide. So it's without a doubt that most people with hearing loss do not have access to intervention. Even in developed countries like Canada, where there is still a huge gap in services provided for people with hearing loss. Next slide. And therefore, the World Report on Hearing really emphasized the need for integrated people-centered ear and hearing care. And that's what it's all about, where governments need to look at providing hearing intervention. So hearing screening and intervention, ear disease prevention and management, access to technologies, rehabilitation services, improved communication, noise reduction, and greater community engagement. Next slide, please. So the ultimate message coming from the report is we need to act now for ear and hearing care. The growing number of people with unaddressed hearing loss and ear diseases is unacceptable. Urgent action is needed to prevent and address hearing loss across the life course. Investing in cost-effective intervention will benefit people with hearing loss and bring financial gains to society. Countries must act now to integrate people-centered ear and hearing care within the national health plans for universal health coverage. There is a powerful quote that was brought up at the World Health Organization. The cost of doing nothing is one we cannot afford. So today at this webinar, we have wonderful speakers who will touch on these points about why it's important to ensure hearing care for all. And I will now pass it back to Pank to introduce our speakers, and I hope you all enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bowen. Now we come to the final part of our introduction. I'll be introducing our three speakers. First, we have Sherry Ebert from the United States. She runs livingwithhearingloss.com, which is a blog and online community for people living with hearing loss. Sherry experienced progressive hearing loss in her mid to late 20s. She uses hearing aids. She has recently led a successful petition urging video conferencing companies like Zoom to provide free access to auto captioning for people with hearing loss. Prior to her advocacy work, Sherry spent 20 years in the finance industry. And we have Doms Manapas from the Philippines. Doms wrote a book sharing his hearing loss journey named My Cochlear Journey, Hear Beauty from Silence. He experienced total and complete hearing loss within a span of 2 weeks due to bacterial meningitis in 2015 when he was 29 years old. Doms currently works as a team lead at a multinational bank in the Philippines. We also have with us here Lauren Gelly from the United Kingdom. Lauren has over 30 years of experience working closely with hard of hearing people of all ages. She has been a strong advocate and supporter of the hard of hearing community. A big welcome to all our speakers. Now, we shall dive into the speakers sharing session. We will be covering 3 topics in the speakers sharing session. First, the onset of their hearing loss journey. 2, transitioning to this new life. And 3, getting support. For our dear participants, if you have questions throughout the speaker sharing sessions, you may direct them to the chat box, and I as the moderator will pick them up in the question and answer time. Now we come to the first topic, the onset of your hearing loss journey. Our first question is directed to Sherry and Doms. How were you first officially diagnosed with hearing loss? Probably we can start with Sherry first.
All right, great. Well, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. Okay, well, I am from New York City, so I tend to speed up as I talk, but I will do my best to speak slowly. So I first noticed my hearing loss in my mid-20s in business school, and pretty quickly into the first semester, I started missing things in class, mostly things that were mentioned sort of as an aside or under one's breath. And, you know, sometimes the whole room would just start laughing and I would be left looking around, just trying to figure out what was so funny. I'm sure many people on this call have had that experience. My father had hearing loss, so I suspected that it might affect me someday. And as I was having this experience in business school, I thought that maybe this was the time. So I went to get my hearing tested. And I was told that I had mild hearing loss and that there was really nothing to do about it at that time. There was a lot of stigma surrounding hearing loss growing up in my home. So this really gave me the perfect excuse to deny and ignore my hearing loss, but it didn't solve any of the problems that I was having in class. And several years passed, my hearing was getting worse. I noticed problems at work and meetings and certain clients that I didn't hear very well. So I went to get another hearing test, and this time it was suggested that I get hearing aids. And so I did, but again, because of that stigma, I really did not enjoy wearing them. My father had been very, very stigmatized about his hearing loss, and he had passed it down to me. So I would sneak in my hearing aids before meetings and rip them out, you know, pretty quickly afterwards. And it was many, many years before I really accepted my hearing loss. I was hiding it, but once I had kids of my own, this really changed because my hearing loss is genetic. I know there's a chance that they might get it as well. I saw them watching me pass on this same stigma and embarrassment I had learned from my father, and I did not want to keep that cycle going. So I needed to accept my hearing loss, which I did. And now I am an advocate for people like me.
Thank you, Sherry. Doms, how about you?
Hi. Well, I was first diagnosed with bacterial meningitis. And after a week, if I can remember, I caught myself constantly saying, sorry, I can't. Oh, can you repeat that again? And that marks my hearing loss. And after a month, I totally lost my hearing to its entirety. And we asked the doctors why, and they said that it was the result of my meningitis. So at that time, it's a matter of saving my life over my hearing. And obviously, I choose my hearing.
Oh, thank you for sharing. So now we can recap a bit. So after you have got diagnosed with hearing loss, what were the immediate options that you have? Could you elaborate further? Sherry, could you elaborate further on the options?
Of course, sorry. So at that time, really the only option that was mentioned to me was hearing aids. There were no such thing as apps, or mini mics. This was 25 years ago. And I think back at that time, there were no other options. There were no Apple AirPods that people could wear that could help with hearing. So it was really just hearing aids. And I chose an invisible in the canal style because of the stigma. And I have been wearing that type ever since. I actually really like that because I can get some directionality of the sound. Rehabilitation was not really a concept back then. And so that's one of the things that excites me very much about this new report from the WHO is how much it focuses on person-centered care and the importance of rehabilitation and the emotional aspects of hearing loss in addition to the physical aspects of it. So for me, I wasn't even told that I should wear my hearing aids all the time, and I didn't. I wasn't consistent in terms of wearing them. And obviously that's a mistake because the brain acclimates much better if it is able to get that sound processing all the time. So, I always say this is a good time to have hearing loss if you're going to have hearing loss because the technology is advancing as well as the focus on oral rehabilitation.
Yeah, we agree. There's no better time than now. How about you, Doms? What were the options you had back then, and how did the rehabilitation go for you?
Well, first we went to a different hospital for a consultation. The doctor said I should be well first, or I should be strong enough for another treatment before I go back. Fast forward a couple of months later or had passed, we went back to the same hospital with a different doctor and they said otherwise. I had an appointment to see a neurotologist. This was when I first learned about cochlear implantation. That's the only way I could have my hearing rehabilitated. So my specialist put me in contact with a number of cochlear implant recipients to know about their experiences and what to expect next. And after I've been implanted, I can only hear small sound. Actually, I can relate it to chipmunks and Dale for a first month. And then the second month, it would be Transformer sound. And 3 months later, it came to humanize. And right now, it's okay.
Right. Could you give us an estimate of how long did it take from chipmunks to normal human voice?
3 months. Actually, my audiologist said that what do you call that? I cope up with the the cochlear implant fast because it should be like every month there should be a mapping on my device. But he just mapped me 2 months. So that's twice. And he said, and he will just going to um, check me up for the upkeep of my device for a year, yearly.
Thank you for that. And now we have a question for Lauren. What are some of the challenges that you see deaf people face? And what should they look out for in an audiology or hearing care facility?
I think Dom's has probably hit the nail on the head. The first thing I would say that people face is a lack of information. Actually, a sudden hearing loss in your adult years is not very common, despite the prevalence of hearing loss generally. And people to whom that happens tend to feel very isolated for a long time. They don't know how to find other people to check with them what should be happening now. And sadly, many of the professionals aren't always aware of all the options. So I think the biggest challenge is finding somebody else who's been down the same path as you, who can share your experiences, share the frustrations, share the tears. Also, however, share the strategies and the tips and the triumphs that you find. And above all, allow you to know what you can expect and what you should expect from your audiologist. Because while finding other people is challenging, I have to say sometimes it's also challenging finding an audiologist who can properly support your journey. And of course, in different parts of the world, your access to services is very different and arranged in different ways, and it's got different cost implications as well. So there is no value in going into that. But I think for me, the most important thing any audiologist has to be able to offer you is listening to you, listening to your experience, listening to your journey, and understanding that whilst they may see dozens of patients with the same story, for you, it's your first time, and you really need hand-holding through that.
Right, yeah. So essentially peer support is one crucial factor that is missing, and that's the reason we are here, and that's the reason personally I appreciate we have International Federation Hard of Hearing Young People, that we are here so we all understand each other, and that's encouraging.
If I could just add to that, we've already mentioned the World Hearing Report, which is excellent. It stresses quite heavily, I'm delighted to see, the recommendation on rehabilitation, not just providing hearing aids or cochlear implants, but properly rehabilitating people, because as Doms has said, it doesn't come quickly or naturally. You need work, you need effort. But alongside the work on the devices, the World Hearing Report talks about rehabilitation. And for me, one of the most important parts of rehabilitation is connecting with other people. And that is best done through organizations just like this one and many others through the world. And that needs resources. It needs money. It needs funding. And actually being able to advocate for the proper resourcing of organizations such as this one is something we all can combine to get behind.
Right. Hearing aid and cochlear implant is not the end, it's just the beginning of the journey. And that leads to our second topic, right? So after a person gets treated, maybe getting hearing aid or cochlear implant, there's a new life ahead. That's hence the topic of this webinar, the new life. So it's about transitioning to this new life. So now we are moving to the second topic. Our first question under this topic is directed towards Sherry and Doms. How do you take the news of your hearing loss? Probably we can start with Sherry first.
So because there was such a big stigma in my immediate family with my father's hearing loss, my family's reaction was not so great when I went to them and said that I thought I was having hearing loss as well. I remember my mother asked me, do you really need to wear those hearing aids? And obviously the answer was yes. So that was unfortunate, but fortunately I did get a better reaction from my new family, my burgeoning family. I was recently engaged, and both my husband now, not at the time, but my husband now, and his family have always been very, very supportive. But even so, I still kept it a secret from my friends for many, many years. But as I was trying to be more open about my hearing loss to set a good example for my children, many years later, I started to volunteer at hearing loss charities. And that's where I met other people with hearing loss. And this became part of my new family, really. And I know we've mentioned this a number of times, but I really can't emphasize enough how life-changing it was for me in that moment to meet other people who could really understand what I was going through and could commiserate with me, but also could inspire me, because so many of them were living so well with their hearing loss. They were composers and writers and successful business people. And so it just gave me hope for the first time that this was going to be something that I could manage in my life.
Thank you, Sherry. How about you, Doms? How did your family take the news of your hearing loss?
Well, they were first stunned, of course. And the hardest part of this journey would be seeing your parents cry, because of my situation. But I'm so lucky to have a very supportive family. And here in the Philippines, cochlear implants are not funded by the government. So the prospect of having to purchase a cochlear implant was both daunting and expensive. And due to my limited finances, I had to raise funds before going with the surgery. My parents helped me with their savings, with some of their savings. I spoke to my company to request assistance and spoke to various institutions to seek for financial help. It took me 12 months to raise enough funds to proceed with the surgery. My parents are my constant reminder just to hang in there, and because help is on the way. And they really understand that waiting can be uncomfortable, but it's all that I can do at that time.
If I could just add to that, I worked for a long time in the UK for an organisation called Hearing Link, which provides adjustment and communication support for adults who are going through what we've just been hearing about. And that organisation always includes family members, because I think sometimes, again, I'm not taking a knock at the professionals, but sometimes the focus is too much on the ears and the devices, and your hearing connects you to other people in your community, in your family. And if something has happened to the hearing of one member of a family, it's going to require adjustment and goodwill on the part of the other members of the family. And so they too need support. Their role is not just to hold you up, their role is also to come to terms with changes in their own family, how they relate to people, how they communicate.
Yeah, indeed, we can see that support is a central theme in helping lead deaf adults to thrive in this new life, and that's the topic that we'll cover in the next topic. Now, we are still in the second topic, which is about transitioning to this new life. Our question number 2 for Sherry and Doms as well. Tell us about how this hearing loss, the news of hearing loss, and how this changed your work life. Sherry.
So this was a big change for me in terms of my work life, because I was struggling, and I would come to meetings with a lot of stress because I didn't know if I was going to be able to participate in the way that I wanted to, or hear as well as I wanted to. And I found myself, avoiding certain clients, the ones that I knew I wasn't going to hear well. And obviously that was not good for my career. But my career did progress, and I became a manager. And what I realized is that being a manager is all about listening to people's secrets, right? They come in and they tell you, I'm ill, or I'm pregnant, or I'm having a problem with my manager. And most of the time, these secrets are discussed in a quiet voice. And it's hard, when you can't hear well, to ask people, can you just repeat that very sensitive topic that you just mentioned in a louder voice, please? So it was definitely a challenge. And because I was so stigmatized, back then, I wasn't as open as I should be. And I think one of the major, learnings for me is that you need to be open about your hearing loss in the workplace, because especially, if you have a track record of good performance, they're going to see that. And your hearing loss is just one piece of you. It's not going to be your defining characteristic. But in order to perform well, you need to let other people know about that so that you feel comfortable asking for the assistance that you need, and people can provide it.
Thank you, Sherry. How about you, Toms? How it changed your work life?
Well, for me, it was a major and drastic change, because I used to take in calls for a bank because I work as a financial technical analyst, and how can I do my task? And so they have to get me on a back end office, so my hearing won't be stressed.
Right. So did you just say that you had to transition from a front end to a back end kind of role?
I'm sorry.
So were you saying that you had, because of your hearing loss, you had to transition to a more back end role? I see. How did you convey that to your manager that you need? How did it happen?
Well, I'm always open to my hearing loss, because this is how it is, and if I show up without hearing, how can I perform? So I just might as well just tell it.
Right. So you just, when you know that you had hearing loss, day one, you just go to your manager and tell him or her that you have hearing loss. Is that what happened?
Yes. I actually just texted her. We just chatted, because I don't know if I'm going to hear her. Oh, well, I know that that I'm not going to hear her. But what I'm scared of would be not understanding me. That's quite scary for me. That's quite scary for me at that time.
But it turned out that they were understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Now we have the next question for Lauren and for both all speakers as well. So this is a statement. questions. So nobody knows what I am going through having hearing loss. How do I pick myself back up? Lauren?
I think the theme is coming through really clearly. We're very much agreed, all of us. The most important way to pick yourself back up is to know you're not the only one who has had to live through this. To know that others have not only lived through it, but survived it, and indeed are thriving. And that's where I think peer support is absolutely vital. Someone like me, who still has pretty good hearing, although I struggle if it's noisy, has no right to say to anyone, it's okay, you can learn how to do this, because they can look straight back at me, and believe me, many have done, and said, what do you know about it? And they're absolutely right. I do not know what it is like to live with not hearing well every single day and night of my life, and to know that it will be like that forever. I can attempt to understand. I have worked and lived alongside many, many people who've taught me a lot, but the most important thing they've taught me is I cannot understand it. Only someone else who's living with it can truly understand and can truly say, I know it's really, really tough at the moment, but trust me, it gets better. And here's a few things I find helpful along the way to get to that point more quickly. So I really think it is sharing with other people, once you've found them, that is the single most important way forward for anyone.
Yeah, indeed. Probably Sherry can elaborate more on how did you went from the denial stage to acceptance and thriving now?
So some of it was just my children, because I realized that, you know, I was sort of going to be passing on the same embarrassment, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. I realized just how ridiculous it was. I think actually having the support of my family, my husband, you know, showed me that was just a silly way to be. And I also think it was the peer support, because I started to finally meet other people with hearing loss. Up until that point, and I think for many people who lose hearing later in life, you don't know any other person that's experiencing this. I had my father, but unfortunately that was not a good role model. So it was really when I started to meet other people that I started to realize that it wasn't a shameful thing. It was just a thing that had happened. And while we all need to take the time, I believe, to mourn it as a loss, because for many of us, it truly is a drastic change to our life, and we need to acknowledge that emotional experience. But sharing that with other people and then seeing again how they're thriving, it's just such an inspiring information. So HLAA in the United States was a huge support for me, and it's wonderful to see that this organization is reaching out to people in other countries as well. But one thing I would say is that one of the silver linings about the pandemic is how a lot of the peer support has moved online. And so we really welcome everyone from around the world, from every experience, to join us at HLAA. We have webinars like this one. We have virtual meetings that we started during the pandemic, and we did get people from all across the world, and we have a shared experience. And so I think it's wonderful that we're able to come together in that way. So thank you for hosting these type of events. It's really the best thing, I think, for people with hearing loss is to come together. We're just stronger that way.
Thank you for coming and sharing your experience as well. And we agree, this pandemic has indeed provided an opportunity. If there was no pandemic, this webinar might not have happened. We don't know. And Sherry mentioned about HLAA, which stands for Hearing Loss Association of America. This is one of the organizations that provides support. And after this webinar, we will be sharing a list of support resources to everyone here. So don't worry about that. So for DOMS, how yours is quite recent. You experienced it back 5 years ago. So probably your memory is fresher. So how was it like? How did you went from denial to accepting and thriving?
Well, I surrendered my deafness and so was myself to God. You know, because I just said, Lord, it's in your hands. I have faith in you. And during those times, I am so depressed. But one day, I just told myself that I can't be like this. And I can end up like this. There are so many things that I want to achieve. Places that I like to see and memories that I'd like to make. And I still want to bring back the smile and joy to my parents' face. I still want them to be proud of me. So I started asking for help on how I can gather funds as possible, and more importantly, the support. And instead of my deafness and tinnitus, I divert my attention. I write my experiences. It is now an ebook. I wrote my cochlear journey here, Beauty from Silence. And it is a story of how God molded me in silence, but with a great impact. It's now available in iOS and Google Playbook, by the way.
Thank you, Doms. Now we shall move on to the next topic, which is about getting support. We would like to spend a bit more time on this section. Our first question is for Lauren. You mentioned about this briefly, but what communication strategies can families and individuals use to try and adapt?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, again, it is about families as well as individual. So there are many things that someone whose hearing has changed will have to learn to do differently. However, many of those things won't be particularly helpful if their family or their friends or their workmates don't also accept the need to behave differently. At the individual level, I think the first thing is just to spend time becoming more aware of lip reading. It's the one really inescapable skill that you need. Again, there are different ways of learning that around the world. There are different accesses to different types of groups and facilities. But increasingly, there are online options, which are really great. And this started pre-pandemic, fortunately. But becoming aware of how to use your eyes to complement what you hear is really important. I think there are other practical strategies like getting your lighting right, standing in the right place, choosing where to go to have conversations, all those practical strategies. Once you have lived with hearing loss for some time, you begin to become automatically aware of those, but they're not always obvious at the beginning. So finding, again, a community, a group, an online resource that can help you to become aware of those more quickly would be a really important step. Another thing I would say is there are some fantastic technologies out there, hearing aids and implants and BAHAs, of course, but also various accessories. So if you are fortunate enough to have a hearing aid, there are many things you can use in addition to that under different circumstances. So make it your business to find out about those and then fight for them. And sadly, often you have to fight for them. And if there's something you can think of that would be really helpful for you and it doesn't exist yet, well, invent it. There'll be a lot of people very happy that you've done so. With the families and friends, I think the important thing to remember for them is it does require change from their point of view, and therefore they require gentleness and patience as they make those changes and adjustments, just as someone who's learning how to communicate differently because their own hearing has changed. And adjustment is as important in my eyes as communication strategies. I don't mean you have to accept what's happened or become resigned to it or anything. I just mean adjust to the fact that life will be different, that you will have to behave differently, different things will happen to you, but it's still a really great life, and it's what you're going to make of it. And the final thing I would say that goes right across communication strategies and adjustment in everything, the single best asset you've got is a smile. It's as simple as that. If you approach people with a smile and a positive expectation that you're going to have a good conversation, you're much more likely to have a good conversation than if you approach them with an expectation that it's all going to go bad and they're not going to understand. And that's actually very challenging, because when you're concentrating so hard on their face, it's very easy to look quite fierce. So practice smiling. It's probably the most important communication and adjustment tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, indeed. Everyone can smile, and that's the first thing we can do. Sherry, you mentioned that your family, maybe especially your dad, wasn't very supportive. Maybe it stigmatized the family. What do you wish you had known? Like what would you tell your younger self if you had a family who is not supportive? What would you have done?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that you just have to seek out other people. You have to find that support network. And if it's not going to be given to you as easily, you need to put in that work to go out and seek it. And that's what I had to do. And that's what I did do. But I think also that, you know, just to have that strength from within, right? And to realize that we all have resilience inside of us, and we all have challenges, whether it's hearing loss or it's something else. And so as much as we feel alone, a lot of times when we have a struggling situation, we're really all connected in that way as people, and that we all are just struggling to, you know, live the best life that we can. So I think it's important to seek out positive influences and keep things in perspective.
Yes, indeed. We would like to move on to the next question. We were talking more about communication strategies. Now we would like to extend that to the workplace settings. So for Sherry and Dom's, these questions, what should we know about navigating workplace settings? Probably Dom can start first. What should we know about navigating workplace settings?
Well, you just have to be first friendly, but know your ground. Second is to have an open-minded or open communication with your boss. As a hard-of-hearing individual, I immediately told my colleagues, and I thought that they'd understand. But I still experience office bullying. There were times that we were eating in a cafeteria, so we were chatting, and I didn't catch what my colleague has said. So I asked for it one more time. And do you know what she said? You don't understand because you are deaf. And not just once. It happens twice. And imagine how those words hurt me. And being left out in the conversation, that was not okay, but I can let it pass. I don't expect them to truly know how it feels to be deaf, but at the least be considerate of my situation. So I told my boss not to complain, but it's my hidden agenda because, hey, you hurt my feelings. Kidding aside, just to let her know that I cannot let that rudeness slide. And if I do, I will let her think that she can make fun of us. And third, have a goal. Do your best in everything that you do. Be better than yesterday, every day. That's how I earn my trust. That's how I earn the trust of my bosses and my coworkers. And right now, I'm a team leader in a multinational bank, and I still push myself to do better.
Thank you, Doms. Do you have anything to add on this, Shari?
I would think just to reiterate the message about disclosing and making sure that you're not taking this burden on fully yourself, but that you're involving others in terms of the communication. And because hearing loss is often invisible, people are not going to know that you need help unless you mention it. So I would encourage people to not be shy about that. But also to be as specific as possible in terms of your requests. So everyone's hearing loss is different, as we know, and every situation has different challenges, as we know. And so other people who don't live with every day are not going to understand that. So when we walk into a setting, we need to be as specific as possible in terms of educating and asking for what we need. And the other thing I would mention is just to be open to technologies. So we have hearing aids or we have cochlear implants, but there's so much innovation in terms of technology today, different speech to text apps, amplifier apps. So I would encourage everyone to be sort of experimental and have fun with it. And I think that's actually another way you can engage the hearing community or your family or at work, because it's kind of cool to try out, like, hey, look at this new app that I found, look at this new thing. And if you engage people in sort of the creativity and the fun of it, it becomes more of a team sport, and you have people on your side. And when you get people on your side, you're going to be successful.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, definitely. For Lauren, so if someone with hearing loss asks you, what should I know about navigating workplace settings, what would you say?
Well, actually, I don't think I can say it better than Shari and Doms have just said it. So all I can do is echo a few of their points. I think, firstly, it is important to be aware that there are problems around you and from you in the workplace, and not to try and hide from that. The worst thing of all is to try and pretend it's not happening, because it is. I think the comments have been made very strongly that to approach it in a positive way is really vital. No workplace, no matter what issue you're talking about, no manager wants you to come with a problem and just park it with them. They want you also to come with a solution. So what Shari has said, what's a solution for one person will not be the solution for another person. And you can't expect people to know what solutions you want if you don't know them yourself. So take the time to work out what is it that you would like to see to happen differently. Be very clear about that. And then present that as a positive goal to work towards, rather than a big problem to cause an issue somewhere. And I think something Don said much earlier is really important here as well, to remember that your hearing loss is only one part of you. You're in that workplace because of the skills you bring and the knowledge and expertise you can apply to your job. And so be confident of that. Know why you're there, know how you're contributing to the workplace, and make sure that you tell your manager or whoever, sometimes it's just your colleagues, this is what I need from you so that I can do the part of my job that I'm here to do. So again, it distances it a little bit from you and your hearing, and it takes it back to the workplace in a very constructive and positive way. It takes confidence, of course, to do that, and resilience. And when you're confronting lack of understanding and sometimes very unhelpful attitudes day by day, that can be tough. So that's where it comes back to have somebody you can reach out to who's lived that same situation and can help you through those hard times when we just really think, I can't take this anymore. You need someone to reach out for.
Yeah, we have a question from the floor that is very relevant what we are sharing right now. So this question is that it's about navigating workplace settings. So the statement is, I can't follow work Skype calls when questions are directed to me. If I ask someone to repeat the questions, someone else often takes over or speaks for me. But I don't like interrupting, but I also don't want to look, but I also don't look competent. What can I do? The question, yeah.
That's a great question. And it's a challenging situation. And I think that's where technology can really help. Because if you're not catching the question, perhaps there's a different phone that you could be using, a captioned phone, or you can use, one of your handy dandy apps, a speech to text app. Or you could, if it's a phone call that's a video call, you could ask someone to put the question into the chat. So I think it's a matter of being creative in that moment. And it's hard because in that moment, you have that feeling of panic that, oh my God, I need to answer this question and I don't understand what it is. So it's practicing a little bit up front in terms of, okay, what's going to happen in that situation and what can I do? So I don't know that there's a specific answer that will work in every situation, but I think you need to have a creative approach, use technology, and also ask maybe for a different mode of communication. So ask to do a video call instead of a regular phone call, and that'll give you more of the cues that you need with speech reading and the ability to use that chat.
Thank you, Sherry. Do you have anything to add on this, Doms?
Well, try to have your thoughts more sensible, and try to have them think, so you will not be interrupted. You just have to be more, you just have to come up with an intelligent thoughts. That's what it is.
Thank you, Doms. Okay, we are just in time. We can enter into question and answer session now. We have a couple of questions that have been collected in advance from the sign-up form and as well as throughout this webinar. So we would like to move to the first question for Q&A, and this is open to all our speakers. So first, this is a question from a participant. I am grateful for the technology that is available now, but I'm disappointed that it doesn't help more. Should I just accept that this is my life now?
Shall I kick off on that one?
Yep, Lauren.
I would say, firstly, technology will never solve all problems anyway. So whilst I said earlier, you should make sure you're getting the most from it, it's a mistake to think that it will ever solve everything. It won't, it can't. Second, I would say you need to remember that whatever technology you're talking about, you'll need to work with it. You'll need to put some effort sometimes into learning how to use it. So if you find it disappointing, just be sure that you have actually put as much as you need to into that. It may well be that you have, and you've reached the final stages of how much it can do for you, but just be sure for your own sake that you've done that. But I would also say that you shouldn't just accept that that's as good as it's going to get, for two reasons. One, it can always get better, and it may be that you've not hit the right technology yet. There may be something else out there that you don't know about yet, so keep looking. And finally, with technology, it's obvious, but it's always developing, it's always advancing, it's always changing. So even if you did know everything that was available 6 months ago, look again. And again, I mean, I'm banging this drum a lot, but sharing that search with a wider community of people who are also engaging in that search is tremendous, because you may not come across something, but somebody else probably will if it's out there. So keep connected to communities that can put you in possession of the knowledge about what new technologies have been developed that might help.
Thank you, Lauren.
I would add that I think that communication takes a number of things, good communication. It does take technology for sure, but it also takes communication best practices. And that's where the education piece of it comes in, and the ability to understand your own needs and then to let other people know about them. So you do have to accept to some extent that communication is going to be a little bit more challenging than it has been in the past. But I would never accept that you cannot communicate effectively or wonderfully with other people, because you can, and it will take more than technology. It'll take technology and these communication best practices and effort, but it's worth it. And so we all need to just commit to putting in that extra effort and asking others to put in that effort as well.
Thank you, Sherry. Dom, do you have anything to add? If not, we'll move on to the next question. Okay.
No, none.
Okay, so we will move on to the next question. How is everyone coping with COVID-19 where you can't lip read or sign as usual?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Those masks are killer, right? It takes away, I always like to think of lip reading as our superpower, right? And it takes that away. So it's basically just all these best practices sort of on steroids, right? You need to be even more open about the challenges and more specific about what you need in order to communicate. And you need to really be creative about the solutions. And that's why I've been so excited about how the hearing loss community has come together in this challenging time to advocate for what we need, to raise awareness about clear masks, and to push for Zoom and others to provide these captioning services for free, because we need them. They are our link to other people. And what I find so inspirational is just how the community really banded together. So in challenging times like COVID-19, we saw what we can do. And so let's keep that up, and let's keep advocating even as times hopefully become more normal.
Yes.
And yeah, I agree to Shari. You should be creative. Try to ask open-ended questions. So they will just answer yes or no. They can nod and no, and for no. No, during even pre-COVID-19, when I didn't have my cochlear implant, I used to go to the market and I used to take a bus. So I'm just asking how much is it? No, I'm not asking how much is it. I'm just saying I would like to buy it for 10 peso. And they'll just answer yes, no, yes, no. But whenever I experience, because I've always experienced being asked for a direction, just answer them, no, I don't understand. No, I don't know. And then I go.
Right. I think one thing that helps is the clear mask, that transparent face mask. Now we have to wear masks, and asking the people around us to wear the clear mask is something that can help, but that can be difficult as well. We have another question. Okay, the question is, are there any suggestions for how to access services for late hearing loss, including learning advocacy skills. This type of services seem to be focused on youth or students for good reason, but they are also needed for those with later hearing loss. I'm going to share this question in the chat as well.
Well, I think the best answer to this question is to do what we're doing today, which is to come together as people with hearing loss and share our experiences, share what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and what works for me might not work for another person, but it might work for someone else. So I think the best way to learn some of this is together. I do also think it's important to advocate with the audiology community that they should be providing some of these services, particularly to patients who are new to hearing loss. And that's part of what I really like to do in some of my speaking engagements with audiologists, is to share that perspective of the person with hearing loss and explain what it is I wish I had learned from them that took me so many years to learn on my own. So I think it's a two-pronged approach, that we need to support one another, but also need to urge the community of audiologists and healthcare professionals to alter the information or augment the information that they're providing to people with hearing loss right off the bat.
Thank you, Sherry.
I think I would add to that, and tying it back to the question, one of the things the question spotlights is that there are different types of hearing loss and different age groups for hearing loss. And it's very easy to identify services for children and young people in the education system, for example, because they're provided in a context. And quite often what's provided there isn't particularly helpful for someone who is older than that. But it's often difficult, again, it's coming back to the same problem, to find where to get the right support for you, to find where the advocacy services that would advocate for you and your needs can be found. And that, again, is through mostly organizations such as this, and HLAA and Hearing Link and many others across the world, that can help you to find the right place to find the advocacy you need for your particular circumstances. And that will be different from other communities of deafened, hard of hearing people of every age group, fortunately, because the needs are different and the solutions are different for the most part. So it's about finding the right thing for you, as it is with so many of these questions.
Thank you, Lauren. Would you like to add, Doms?
No, I don't have. Okay. Shari already spoke it.
Okay. All right. We have a list of questions I'm looking through. Give me a second. Okay, this question is for Sherry. How did you find out about Hearing Loss Association of America, and how long have you been involved with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was surprising to me how long it took me to learn about Hearing Loss Association of America. I wish I had learned about it many, many years earlier than I did. It really was almost luck that I came about it. I was involved with a different organization, Hearing Health Foundation, and someone in that community mentioned to me, "Oh, do you know about HLAA?" And I had no idea. So it was word of mouth. But I do think now it's easier to Google and find out about these type of things. There are many Also, even on social media, there are many Facebook groups where you can put in, hearing loss into Facebook, and you'll see different groups. There are many blogs. I have a blog. There are other advocates that have blogs. So there are other ways now to learn about HLAA and other types of organizations. And I have been involved with them. I really have to do the math. I think it's been probably 5 or 6 years now. But it's been a life-changing experience, like I said, to find other people with hearing loss and working together to help not only ourselves, but everyone with hearing loss. So I encourage everyone on this call to become an advocate, because as you advocate for yourself, you're advocating for everyone else and vice versa, and would just create a better and more open society.
Thank you. Maybe also related to these questions, Doms, do you personally join any community groups related to hearing loss?
I just have one, Philippine Cochlear Support Group, but mainly they are focusing on children, but they are also catering, like me, young adult. So that's a good way to just to make you feel that you're not really alone in this. Because sometimes when you are, actually most of the times, when you can't hear, you're isolating yourself. And you just felt that you are alone and nobody can understand you. Well, it's not the fact. Being in a community where, like you, like us, you just feel accepted.
Yeah, indeed. Our next question is from a participant named Sarah. What can we as participants do to make adjustments and information more accessible and easier to find for newly deaf people? I am going to share this question in the chat too. Oh, sorry, not this question. Oh, sorry, for some reason I couldn't copy and paste, but I will repeat the question. What can we as participants do to make adjustments and information more accessible and easier to find for newly deaf people?
I mean, I think it's really partnership. I think it's partnering among the various organizations globally, so that we can share information with one another. And I think it's being outreach. It's really using the power of social media and the power of the internet to make it easier to find. Make yourself Googleable, if that's a word, so that when people are facing these struggles, you pop up to the top. And to have a repository for this type of information, a great website that will have this information so that people can access it. And then have ways to connect, like these types of events.
I think I can't add to that. I think that's perfect in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking quite a bit about people looking for support. But don't forget, there's a lot of people looking for support, and you can be that support. It isn't a one-way street. So make yourself Googleable. I love that word. Make yourself findable. There are people who would really love to learn how it's been for you and share that with you. So it's give and take.
Thank you. Our next question is from a participant named Nalup Wana. The question is, has your hearing loss affected any career decisions you make? Has your hearing loss affected any career decisions you make?
Well, I just like I mentioned earlier, I have been taking calls for a bank, but right now I am an analyst. Um, they just have to. I just can take calls, which is I like it. You know, connecting with people, and as much as they would have to, they can have the technology for me. I just can't because um, during the times that during this pandemic times, I'm just using my audio cable, and that's it. And I can't I can't accept calls. I can't do calls, but we are doing like this Zoom meetings. But it's just it's just um, it's just too challenging for me, you know. And I just have to accept my way to be in a meeting, even if I'm a team leader right now. As much as possible, we just have to be chat or emails.
Thank you, Dom, for sharing.
Could I just say something on that as well?
Sure.
I think Dom's makes a really important point. Sometimes there are things that are too challenging, or they're too painful, or they are things that you don't feel the energy and the effort that you would have to invest to do that is worth it for you. And that isn't always a bad decision to make. Putting the pressure on yourself that you should be able to do everything as if your hearing wasn't changed is not helping yourself to find where you fit well and where you get the best, where you will be able to make your best contribution. So I think it's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing your job, knowing what you can offer, and knowing what you are prepared to do to be able to contribute well, but not expecting yourself to be Superman or Superwoman, and being understanding with yourself about that as well. That's not resigning yourself to substandard. That's about being insightful and making very informed choices about where you put your energies and your efforts.
Yes, indeed. Self-understanding self-acceptance is definitely a huge part of the transition process. We have the next question, and this question is directed to Sherry. How has having hearing loss, besides the need to be a good role model for your children, changed the way you parent, if it has?
That's a huge impact in my life, was having the children and watching their little eyes watching me. I mean, I just saw that I was the role model, and I needed to show a better way to approach any challenge in life, and specifically hearing loss. So in my family, we talk about hearing loss a lot, probably more than my kids, really want to hear about it. But I just try to make it a normal part of the day, a normal part of who I am, as opposed to when I was growing up, it was an unmentionable topic. It was something that was just off the table. And so here, whenever we go, or we used to go out to a restaurant, the whole family works together. And I think that my children now really understand some of the challenges that I face. I think, and I hope that they are just more empathetic as people in general, because they have learned how to accommodate someone else's needs. I've also really tried to teach them to protect the hearing that they have. And now that they're teenagers, sometimes they get very angry with me because I have strict rules about how much, earbud time they're allowed to have, and how loud they can play things, and where they have to wear earplugs when they used to go out to loud places. But I've really been proud of them because they seem to value their hearing, and they have educated their peers as well. They've brought earplugs to different loud parties in the past and handed them out. So I think it's changed, so much in terms of the way that I parent. And I think for all of us, or down the road, as if we become parents, it's just a great way to teach everyone that we all face adversity, but there are ways to get around it, and they can too.
Thank you, Sherry. We now have 3 minutes left, so we are going to have a closing questions. We see that there are a few more questions. We will work with our speakers after this webinar to get a written response. But for now, we will go to our closing questions. So for all three speakers, if we only have one thing to take away from this webinar, what would it be? If we only have one thing to take away from this webinar, what would it be?
Well, I think it's that you're not alone. We're not alone. We are all here together. We can understand the challenges that we are facing, even though they're slightly different. But we are strong together, and we can support one another. So that is the clear message, I think, of this webinar.
Indeed, I agree.
I'm not going to be much different than that. I think that is the key message. No one is alone. And if you haven't found the right person or organization yet to connect with, keep looking. It's there. The person is there. And Google is your friend. Just keep looking.
Thank you, Lauren. I think Dom is experiencing some internet connection issue. Okay. Okay. So thank you for the speakers. Like I said just now, we see there are a couple more questions are not addressed yet that we don't manage to cover in this webinar, but we will be working with Sherry, Dom, and Lauren to get their written response. We have your email address. Everyone who is here, we have your email address. So we will be in touch with you, share with you the written response after that. So now it's my turn to provide a summary of this webinar. And Sherry put it very well. We are all in this together, and this is the firm foundation that we can all rely on. And from here, we can solve things one by one. And when it's always about the people, so you know people, every one of us knows something, and I know something, I share with you, and you share with me, and together we inspire each other, and that's how. And that's why peer support is important, to find a community, to find resources, people who can understand you. It may not be in a family, but you can seek out, you can Google. And there are people who are trying to make themselves Googleable, like Sherry, and definitely look out for them. Yes, and so as a follow-up, after this webinar, my teammates and I will be sending out an email to everyone present here, a list of support resources provided by Sherry, Dom and Lauren, as well as their email address, so that you can reach out to them directly. We will also include a feedback form in that email so that you could share with us your thoughts, your feedback, your suggestion concerning this webinar. And do you have does anyone have any things to add? Owen, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Peg. First, I want to thank you for such an excellent job moderating this webinar. You've put up with so many thoughtful questions and making this webinar really informative. And thank you to Sherry, Rowan, and Dom, who unfortunately has internet difficulty, so he's not able to be on camera at the moment. I just want to conclude that we hope to continue to offer more webinars in the future so that we can continue to have the opportunity to connect with one another. I also want to acknowledge our captionists from Global Real-Time Captioning for providing access for our webinar. And for the first time ever, thanks to one of our team members from Bolivia, Say, who was able to arrange Spanish captioning through Contextual. And this is a milestone moment for us where we want to strive to be as accessible and inclusive for all hard of hearing people around the world, particularly starting with those who live in South America. So this is part of our commitment to ensure that we provide as much language, accessibility, and inclusivity for all of our events. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. And we know that this is just the beginning, and Sherry put it so well, we're all in this together, and we will always be part of the journey together.
Yeah, so this, it's almost 11 Eastern time. So this marks the end of this webinar. We really appreciate attendance. It means so much to us. And we hope you enjoyed this session too. And we shall keep in touch. So good day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye.